This video is supported by Squarespace. Hey, Marcus House with you here. We have been spoiled for flyovers of both starbases again this week. Lots of extra intel to sift over as we approach the first orbital flight of Starship, and we think that SpaceX might even be gearing up for some more tandem testing. Starlink launches continue, but more importantly, big news around the network amongst some intriguing information about it being hacked. Yep, diving into that too. We also have Artemis 1 being rolled to the pad for the final time. This is the moment that we have been waiting 3 decades for. Also, more brilliance from the James Webb Space Telescope, and we are just getting started.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
So we left off last week just after Booster 7 had made its way back to the build site to have all 13 inner Raptor engines installed. Well, the team at SpaceX were rapidly getting that organised throughout this week. Ship 24 this week almost seemed to be put on hold. Keep in mind though that each road closure needed for these static fire events includes shutting down all ongoing work at the launch site. If SpaceX can simultaneously test both the ship and a booster at the same time during a closure, it could make sense to wait for Booster 7 or even Booster 8 to come down to be tested as well. That means less interruption for the public and the SpaceX team that way. Now, if you remember last week, we also talked about the chill venting of Ship 24. I had a bunch of you in the comments asking why these latest ships don't seem to be doing the same triple venting that we saw on early Starships. Well, that is a good question actually, and I've never really explained it before. The engine chill system, as it is on Ship 24 as an example, leads some of the engine chill gases away from the engines to these two pods here. That evolved just a little from Ship 20, which used a somewhat similar setup of two pods. However, each only had one big vent, and they were at a different location on the skirt. If we go back even further in time to the suborbital hops and look at SN15, we can now see that the engine chill vents were also on the heat shield side of the vehicle, something that obviously can't work now with the tiles there. Of course, the booster testing goes through similar systems as well, as we could clearly see from the week prior, but another common question I get is how much methane is actually being vented out into the atmosphere. Well, this isn't hugely clear, but from the PEA document, we can see right here that SpaceX expects methane to be released into the atmosphere with each static fire test, and we are talking about quite a volume for a full 33 engine Raptor test. Quote, SpaceX estimates approximately 7 metric tons of liquid CH4 would be released to the atmosphere. Now, CSI Starbase here provides a pretty persuasive argument to suggest that the recent Booster 7 test explosion may be forcing SpaceX to rethink this approach more quickly to ensure that the released methane is largely recaptured. If so, that would help avoid the potential of another spin prime test explosion. In fact, there is already a lot of new plumbing here being installed as captured here by Boca Chica Gal with NASA spaceflight. Just part of a pretty major update to the orbital launch mount, so SpaceX have certainly put a lot of new plans in action. Now, this is all quite speculative currently, so we're waiting to see further evidence of this, just to be clear. Along with this, the Mechazilla tower arms continue being upgraded. They have been fixed since the hydraulic issue 2 weeks ago, and additional hardware needed to support future catching of a booster and ship is being installed on the chopsticks. These actuators arrived midweek as part of these upgrades. All of these updates are going to ensure that the arms have got a nice cushion for the booster to land on, as it is of course quite difficult to perfectly zero out the velocity of the booster right as it touches down. Take Falcon 9 for example. SpaceX has now landed this so many times now, and it still has some wobble right on touchdown. A great example of this from a launch just a few weeks ago. Falcon 9, however, has built-in crush cores in the legs set to help out with compensating for those slight velocity errors. The advantage that the super heavy booster has though is that it can technically hover, where Falcon 9 can't due to that minimum thrust to weight ratio that it has when empty. Now, I just want to be perfectly clear here. This does not mean that SpaceX are attempting to catch a booster on the first flight. Now, before you start writing comments angrily below, yes, I do realise that the FCC mentioned that the booster will either do a partial return and land in the Gulf of Mexico, cargo or do a full return with a catch attempt. But this was SpaceX's Federal Communication Commission filing. It has got nothing to do with the Federal Aviation Administration flight approval, which is the critical approval. So yes, I'm not saying that it is impossible that SpaceX could attempt a catch, but I suspect this is more pre-preparation for if they wanted to attempt it. Myself, I find that extremely unlikely for that first flight. Okay, so over to the build site, the action with Ship 25 continued this week. Its nose cone was moved into the high bay along with its payload section, which moved in the day before. In fact, check out this image from RGV showing the showing the Starlink Pez dispenser inside the payload bay. That is pretty great, seeing it from above like that. Since then, of course, the nose cone has been stacked onto the payload bay section. Now, the nose cone most likely designated for Ship 26 had some odd work done on it this week. Last week we saw tiles added to the nose cone, but this week they were removing them again. Has SpaceX changed the procedures with these in regards to the tiles, or is there something else going on? It being scrapped seems to be out of the question, as the forward section was sleeved around a week ago, and now sections such as the common dome are still having work done, neither of which have tiles yet. Yep, something different seems to be going on with Ship 26. So what about over at Cape Canaveral? Yep, a bit has happened here as well. New SpaceX crane parts for another LR11000 crane, all branded with the SpaceX logo here, have arrived in Florida. More parts of it are around the site, such as the gantry. Close by we can spot a lot of the boom segments, and yes, those red segments have been transported inside the bigger black boom segments. We see here the cab section, which even looks to have arrived during the flyover. On Monday, the 7th section here was moved out to Pad 39A for the second Starship launch and integration tower. Great shots there by Spaceflight Now. The crane used to stack these tower sections needed to first be lowered and extended to give enough clearance to stack this section. The size of this now is just massive. We now have only two smaller sections to go now, Section 8 here and the top cap section, both of which now look near structurally complete. Next to these sections, we see that SpaceX has placed back 3 of the pre-assembly feet, and right next to them are the 4 concrete interfaces. That certainly looks like the start of Tower 3 is going to kick off real quick. Where that tower is going to be constructed though is still a mystery. But what else is mysterious? Well, if we quickly head over to Hangar X, we see some interesting bits too. Look at what we see here, a self-propelled modular transporter being set up in a very long configuration. I estimate around 54 meters as it sits there currently. There are even more of these SPMTs right next to it, available to extend it even longer if needed. We are assuming that this is for some more efficient transportation of Falcon 9 boosters given the ridiculous launch cadence right now. Big thanks to Lab Padre and the patrons supporting Greg and Fariella's flights here with me. It is amazing to have these perspectives, and there is loads more on Greg's Patreon as well if you would like more detail. We may well have a big week coming as we continue to observe the quite astounding steps towards the first orbital test flight of Starship. Just imagine when we are able to send such huge masses to orbit with a fully reusable vehicle. Where the Falcon 9 has broken major ground, the second stage is still left to disintegrate on re-entry. Starship will finally make colossal missions to the Moon and Mars more practical. In fact, more than anything, I am so looking forward to the transfer vehicles that we could construct due to such a drop in mass to orbit costs. Yes, we all know about Starship plans for Mars missions in the future, but when it comes down to it, chemical propulsion being used for transfer vehicles through the vast vacuum of space is actually pretty limited. We've heard Gwen Shotwell and NASA more recently highlight the potential of nuclear propulsion, and I'm covering that and much more in a surprise video coming up on Tuesday. That is not the regular publish time, of course, so make sure you are subscribed to get a reminder of that. And oh man, hit that bell thing. I hate that we've got to say that now. I've even got an email list where you can have it sent to your inbox. Link to all that is below. Well, the moment has arrived at last, as did NASA's SLS Artemis 1 rocket this week. We are potentially well under 2 weeks away now from witnessing this massive launch vehicle leap off Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center. Beautiful shots there by the talented Greg Scott here, who was on the scene. Likewise, Lab Padre had a stream running, so great to have that coverage. More on that in just a second, but real quick, huge thanks to Squarespace for the support of today's video. Squarespace provides you with all of the basic tools that you need to get a website up and running. With this system, you can do it all yourself. You just select a mobile responsive template from the massive list right there, and you can instantly start entering content. If you do need added assistance though, Squarespace experts are there to help with third-party designers and developers. The great thing is that you can just build everything that you are comfortable with and then have the experts assist with polishing it up for you if needed. Along with all those awesome inbuilt tools, you will also find a great library of third-party extensions that can help you manage, optimize, and even expand your site further. The support systems are terrific too. The YouTube channel alone releases new videos each week, such as this one here about the new fluid engine. Also, there is the Squarespace blog and help center, which can keep you up to date with all the things possible on the platform. If you want to check it out for yourself, just head to squarespace.com/MarcusHouse and save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. You'll find that link in the description below. So yes, the first test flight of the uncrewed Orion capsule is finally here. Thankfully, in recent days, the certification process of the Flight Termination System, or FTS, was extended by 5 days. This system, just as it sounds, is designed to more cleanly destroy the launch vehicle in the unlikely event it should stray off course like we unfortunately saw happen to Firefly Aerospace here. The significance of this extension means that all 3 launch opportunities are now available, and those dates, of course, are August the 29th, September the 2nd, and September the 5th. Previously, if SLS did not launch on September the 2nd, it would have meant a rollback to the vehicle assembly building to recertify that flight termination system. The FTS is just one safety feature, but what else ensures crew safety on the ascent of the Space Launch System? Keep in mind that although this is an uncrewed mission, a major part of that is ensuring the safety for the crew on the next launches. Due to that, we also have the launch abort system seen here in an ascent abort test. It's essentially a booster attached to the capsule that can quickly accelerate away, carrying the crew from danger. Following that, the parachutes eventually deploy, delivering the crew into the safe hands of the recovery team. As you can imagine, there is so much work involved to design, simulate, and test a safety system such as this. Some incredible simulations were recently published here showing computer modelling of acoustic vibrations caused by the exhaust plume of the escape system. That is pretty cool. As a launch abort can happen at any stage of the ascent, the simulations here help us to understand how the vehicle structure and crew can be impacted by the vibrations. Scenarios tested include a low angle, high altitude of attack example prior to reaching the speed of sound. Low altitude, supersonic, and high altitude near hypersonic flight aborts were also analysed as well. The supercomputer modelling has even looked at the massive power of the exhaust plume generated by SLS on the pad. Technology such as this reduces the risk and harnesses better understanding for scenarios that are just too expensive to test in those real-world conditions. So yes, now it is time for the real thing, so stay tuned for more exciting developments in the days and the weeks ahead. We are finally heading back to the moon. One exciting announcement during the week was this here. Yep, Sky Perfect JSat Holdings announced that they have signed a contract with SpaceX to launch the Superbird 9 satellite on Starship potentially sometime in 2024. Now, this is the first public customer contract for Starship. An interesting point as well is that this satellite is going to be deployed into a geosynchronous transfer orbit. Based on SpaceX's old Starship user guide, that should be capable of placing 21 metric tons into such an orbit without refilling. Assuming that this one will be a fully reusable vehicle, that would make for an exciting higher speed re-entry than the typical low Earth orbit re-entry. Another batch of Starlink satellites were launched from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station just hours ago on Falcon 9 booster 1062. This was the same booster that launched Inspiration 4 and the Axiom space mission. It has flown 9 times now, so quite an experienced booster. This one, as I talked about last week, there have been around 3,000 Starlink satellites launched, and this mind-boggling number just blows all other networks right out of the water. In fact, it has turned into a significant service that is changing so many lives. To add to the pile of contracts that SpaceX already has, it recently closed a $1.9 million contract with the US Air Force, and this is a 1-year contract to provide Starlink to US military units based at Germany's Ramstein Air Base and a few other locations in Africa. I mean, just think about this for a moment. This was another competitionless sweep for SpaceX. Why? Because they are literally the only low Earth orbit internet company that have the ability to provide such services in both Europe and Africa. The Air Force stated that SpaceX were literally the only bidder that could provide the requested service, and they had already shown that it could operate in a hostile electronic environment. Now, that alone has led to some to ask how robust the network is to cyber attacks. Well, recently, Leonard Wouters, a researcher and hardware security expert, hacked into the Starlink network. What's more is that this hack was done using items that you can buy off the shelf for about $25. Fear not though, because thankfully this was all part of the annual Black Hat Security Conference where Leonard presented his discovery and released the code he used on GitHub so that SpaceX could learn from this and make some updates. SpaceX, I think, are just wonderful at promoting this type of engagement, encouraging researchers to test Starlink for security issues in a non-disruptive way, of course, and to then report their findings through the bug bounty program. Later on, they were shouting out Leonard for being a badass engineer and presumably providing that monetary reward for helping improve the system. Now, it has been a while since I've talked about the James Webb Space Telescope due to the last few crazy weeks, but yes, think about this, it has been well over a month now since we witnessed the very first image reveal from this marvel of human ingenuity. But a lot has happened since then. You can just imagine how much more data that we have to work with when comparing this galaxy cluster taken by Hubble when you compare it to the more recent one taken by James Webb. It is more significant than that though. With Webb and Hubble working together, researchers can see a more detailed picture over a broader range of light wavelengths. Now, there is loads of image data constantly being released, but it is in its raw form. In that way, they are kind of messy black and white shots that need to essentially be converted to show what we perceive as colour. That is because this is infrared light, which makes it very different to Hubble, which can see invisible wavelengths. Anyway, that is a huge thing of its own, and I'm a big fan of Dr. Becky right here, who breaks this down nicely in a lot more detail, so check that out at some point from the link below. Now, we hadn't seen much that was actually processed and released by NASA or ESA for a while until this more recent shot, certainly one of my favourites so far. This is the Cartwheel galaxy with 2 of its companion galaxies there in the top left. It is a composite shot using a combination of the near-infrared camera and the mid-infrared instrument. What is just so mesmerising to me is that what we are really seeing here is the merger of 2 galaxies which collided at high speed around 400 million years ago. The detail is just exquisite too if we compare it to Hubble's shots here. In it, we see 2 rings, the bright inner ring and the colourful outer ring. So how do we see this colour given that it is all infrared? Well, there is a little creative license going on here. What they've actually done is shown the MIRI data coloured in red, as these are the longer infrared wavelengths, while the NIRCam data is coloured blue, orange and yellow to represent the shorter wavelengths. Just look at those separate images though, and you can see why this is useful. Anyway, I just love this particular galaxy simply because it has always been a little mysterious. It's thought that before its merger, the larger galaxy was a much more recognisable spiral like our own Milky Way galaxy. Then they think that a top-down collision by a smaller compact galaxy set off a shockwave, creating this unique galaxy that we now see right now as it continues merging. Just imagine for a second some alien race looking back at us here right now. Our Milky Way galaxy appearing as it was all those many years ago. You've just got to stop and think sometimes about the mind-bending distances that we are talking about here. And if that makes you feel uncomfortable, perhaps focus inward. At the size of atoms within you, you are your own massive universe at that scale, a creature so ridiculously large in comparison that it is equally as hard to comprehend. And we are not even talking about subatomic yet. Well, that got a little deep there, didn't it? Sorry about that. I hope you enjoyed this one in a week that was just a little less crazy than the previous few. Now, I just wanted to take a moment and say how grateful I am to you for being right here and for my great team that work tirelessly to ensure that we can deliver this content to you each and every week. I've got this bizarre job now where my work literally revolves around everything space. Just imagine that. Sometimes I just need to pinch myself. Remember that this is all because of you, so thank you, especially to all the amazing patrons and the YouTube members for supporting what I do here directly. I really do hope that you find these videos helpful in this sometimes crazy world of decreasing attention spans. We've got some new products on the store as well if you need some new mugs, and I've got these and water bottles close at hand, and there are a bunch of other options as well. The link is in the description below. Again, remember our big video coming on Tuesday on future methods of propulsion. I really think that you are going to love that one. In the tile in the bottom left today, we have my previous deeper dive videos on NASA and SpaceX's plans for the Moon and Mars. Then on the right are more of our previous deeper dive videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.